Professor Phineas Mason invites the press to see his new invention, a synthetic man he keeps in an airtight glass cage, which he calls the Human Torch. Whenever the Human Torch comes into contact with oxygen, he bursts into flame, which caused the press to call for his destruction lest he fall into the hands of a madman. Horton refuses to destroy his creation and the press release the story. Members of the Scientists Guild come to observe and analyse the Human Torch and see that Horton cannot control the Human Torch's flame. The Scientists Guild concur that he should be destroyed. However, they come to an agreement that entombing him in concrete until they can figure out how to control his flames is what they shall do. Unfortunately, the tomb has a leak, and the Human Torch contacts oxygen, causing his containment to explode and allowing him to escape. He flees through the city, burning everything he comes into contact with. The fire department try to deal with him, but spraying water onto him does not help. The Human Torch flies off again to look for a retreat and finds it in a pool. In the house of the estate with the pool, Anthony Sardo and his henchman Red discover the Human Torch. They draw the air from the pool and drain its water to contain him. They intend to use him for the purposes of fire insurance. Sardo threatens the president of Ackman Warehouse Incorporated that if they don't sign up for his protection, then he will no longer have any raw steel in his warehouses, which gets him kicked out. They return to the Human Torch, who they load into a sealed tube and onto a truck. The Human Torch believes he's being helped. They take him to one of Ackman Warehouse Incorporated's warehouses and release the Human Torch, causing him to burst into flame and destroy the warehouse. Realizing Sardo was a criminal and that he was used, Human Torch leaves the warehouse and chases Sardo. Sardo seals his house down, but Human Torch melts and burns his way through. Sardo flees, and Human Torch attacks his men. Sardo was found in a laboratory which Human Torch easily enters again. Sardo attacks with gas bombs that have no effect, which the Human Torch also demonstrates he can burn. Horton appears with the fire brigade and rushes to get a tank of nitrogen out of the flames. The Human Torch also spots this and dives for it, closing his arms around it and melting it, sending the gas shooting upward. To Horton's amazement, the Human Torch's flames have extinguished. Sardo realizes the nitrogen probably helped the Human Torch and tries to bargain with a new tube of gas when the Human Torch approaches on flame again. The Human Torch takes the tank away but refuses to let Sardo go, destroying his lab. Sardo decides to take this opportunity to destroy the Human Torch and grabs a tank of sulfuric acid, but it explodes before it even reaches the Human Torch, killing Sardo. Human Torch experiments with the nitrogen and learns to control his flames, including throwing flaming projectiles. When he leaves, he is apprehended by the police and turns his flames off to turn himself in. At police headquarters, he details he was a victim of circumstances in Sardo's plan and is given over to Horton's custody. Returning to Horton's laboratory and seeing the control the Human Torch now has, Horton believes they can make a fortune, which causes the Human Torch to leave so no one can ever use him for selfish gain or crime. A group known as the Six Big Men have taken over a city at gunpoint, threatening people to pay for protection, to fix juries, and to sell only their liquors, among other things. A group of civilians call upon the mayor to act, who brings in the police commissioner, who informs them they haven't had any witnesses to testify. The civilians ask to be sworn in as investigators with full power to act as they see fit. One of the men, Dr. Lang, suggests bringing in the Angel. The police commissioner does not want the Angel involved, as he will go too far and stop at nothing to wipe the Six Big Men out. Suddenly a stone with a note is thrown through the window, from the Angel detailing that he is already after the Six Big Men. Dr. Lang is pleased that his plans are working, but that the Angel will not work out who the big boss is. Days later, Gus Ronson, a member of the Six Big Men, is freed from a manslaughter charge by a fixed jury. After being confronted by the police commissioner to tell him the Angel is after him, Ronson is spooked by an angel-shaped shadow on the building across the street and flees for his car. A figure jumps from the court roof and makes it into Ronson's car before he notices. This figure, the Angel, attacks Ronson in his car, choking him out and killing him. His car is found by the police with his body and a note from the Angel saying, "One of the Six Big Men down leaves 5 left." Word of Ronson's death spreads fast, reaching Mike Malone, another member of the Six Big Men. He isn't scared of the Angel. who quickly reveals himself nearby and attacks Malone, killing him. John Dillon, Malone's friend, tries to escape out the window, but in his confusion chooses the window without a fire escape and falls to his death. A mysterious woman opens the door and leaves a note telling the Angel that John Dillon was another member of the Six Big Men that he can cross off his list. The woman flees the Angel, and he next goes after Trigger Bolo, the next member. He attacks Trigger and his men, but is overwhelmed by their numbers and captured. The woman from earlier appears and says the Angel is not to be killed here, and she tells them that they and Steve Enkel, another member of the Six Big Men, will take the Angel to the woods outside the city. After a car drive, the Angel is tied up to be shot, but the woman, Lil, cuts his ropes with a sharp knife. The Angel uses Steve Enkel as a shield, who is fired upon by Trigger Bolo, Enkel firing back to save himself, and the two men kill each other. Lil drives off, so the Angel heads for the next member, Dutch Hansen. The Angel arrives to him and hurls a heavy chair at him, sending him into the fireplace dead when Hansen reaches for a gun. The Angel pieces things together when he finds money and a key to the Citibank safe deposit boxes, with a note from the boss to deposit it by a certain time. He heads to the bank to see Lil walking with a familiar man, Dr. Lang, realizing he is the big boss. He confronts them about manipulating him into killing the other members of the Six Big Men so they could split their earnings fewer ways. A salvage ship, the SS Recovery, is at sea investigating a wreck. Their diver Rod Nelson returned and claims something was strange about the wreckage. Nelson claims he found the safe in the main saloon of the wreck, but it was empty, indicating someone got to it first, and a non-rusty knife left behind implies it wasn't long before them. The captain claims there hasn't been any other salvage ship in the area for 3 years, and they themselves have been there for a week and seen nothing. He sends Rod Nelson and other crew member Ev Carley back to search for evidence. They find the side hatch of the wreck open and see a figure swimming wearing no diving suit. They follow him to investigate, but the swimmer is too fast and avoids them in the wreckage. Believing the divers to be robots, the swimmer severs their air hoses, telephone cables and acetylene torch tubes. The divers try to seal the air valves in their helmets, but one is stabbed by the swimmer, who then crushes the other's head. Seeing bubbles on the surface and finding the communication wires have been cut, Chip Anderson is sent down to locate his crewmates. He finds their broken bodies and rushes back to the boat to report his findings. The swimmer, the Submariner, seizes the rudder of the ship as the propellers begin to churn and stops the starboard propeller with his bare hands. Unable to repair the damage, the captain orders the engine stopped, but the ship proceeds towards a reef. The Submariner gives the ship a shove and the SS Recovery slams into the rocks, splitting in two. The Submariner brings the bodies of the divers he killed and returns to a secluded hollow, where inside a chapel-like chamber a being known as the Holy One asks the Submariner, Namor, what he has brought. Namor details how he destroyed these beings that came from the ship, a ship he also destroyed. The Holy One orders the helmets removed, which shocks Namor when he discovers they were human. Namor's mother, Princess Fen, is pleased by her son's actions in the start of their war of revenge. She orders the bodies be set out as examples to their worthy people. Namor is confused why humans are so bad, as his father was human. Princess Fen details how the humans arrived on a ship from America, the Oracle, where Namor's father Leonard McKenzie was the captain. They made their base directly above the city, and the people below were tormented for weeks with bombardments of explosives, destroying buildings and killing people in droves. Princess Fen was sent to infiltrate them as a spy, as she most resembled a white human woman. She infiltrated the ship, where she was brought to the captain and cared for, taking time to swim in the water occasionally as it was necessary to continue to live. Princess Fen and Leonard fell in love and were married, while Fen continued to deliver information to her people. As this went on and the people below planned their counterattack, the bombardments continued, killing all but a mere handful. It took years for the civilization to rebuild, and now Fen tasks Namor to be the one to lead them into battle due to being able to live on land and water and fly with the wings on his feet. Namor meets his cousin Dorma in an adjoining chamber and details his journey, which she accompanies him on part way. They travel for 2 days at top speed and emerge at the first sign of civilization, Cape Anna Lighthouse. Namor wishes to destroy the lighthouse to endanger ships and potentially destroy them as their first move. They rush the interior of the lighthouse, with Namor attacking the first person he sees. Dorma is grabbed, which causes Namor to switch targets, and they both make their way to the top of the lighthouse when they see more guards atop it with guns. They rush the beacon, which Namor destroys, and escape the lighthouse on a passing plane with Namor's flight. Namor grapples the pilot and sends him off, instructs Dorma to wreck the plane somewhere and swim back, and dives into the ocean to continue his crusade. Kal Brunder, the ruler of Cactusville, is attempting to force the smaller ranchers to sell out to him at his own price. He sends his gunmen to Jim Gardley, who refuses to sell, but is surprised at gunpoint and taken to Brunder. Jim tells one of the man, Slick, that someday people are going to run the gang out of the country. Jim is brought before Kal Brunder, and Kal sends Slick to deal with the other ranchers. Kal, realizing Jim is unafraid of his threats, calls the sheriff and tells him Jim was caught stealing his cattle, resulting in Jim being locked in jail. Jim starts to get ideas how to deal with the gang of Kal Brunder, and pretends to be ill to lure the sheriff into his cell, as the sheriff wants him to be well to attend trial. Jim knocks him out when he gets close and takes his gun, and then locks him up. Jim borrows a nearby horse and heads into the hills. He makes camp for a while, one night raids his own ranch for supplies, and eventually his days of disappearance become weeks. He trains his aim and draw until he is not missing any shots. Jim desires a top-notch horse, and one day he discovers a magnificent wild one. Jim makes efforts, but the horse remains free until one day it gets itself captured. After days of patience, Jim eventually wins the friendship of the horse, which he names Lightning. Jim adopts the alias of the Masked Raider and, along with Lightning, vows to forever fight the lawless, bring justice to the oppressed, and help the poor. Kal Brunder sends his men to burn down Black's ranch, to send a message to the ranchers he means business. The men set out and shoot Mr. Black as he tells them to stay away. They burn down his ranch, and the news spreads like wildfire. The ranchers decide they need to find a solution. They gather in Lorden's barn, where Lorden is chosen to speak to the ranchers. He recommends they sell to Kal Brunder to avoid any more killings. Kal hears of their decision to sell, but is surprised when his man Rowdy appears and dies in front of him. He has been shot up and a note pinned to his back from the Masked Raider saying Kal and his gang will pay for their crimes, and he is starting to collect. The Masked Raider goes to the sheriff's office and asks if he is willing to join him in opposing Kal to clean up the town. The sheriff agrees to help. Outside the building, a man is eavesdropping, but when his plan to shoot the Masked Raider and the sheriff is interrupted by another crony arriving and starting a conversation, the Masked Raider hears them and heads outside and knocks them out. The sheriff locks the two men up as the Masked Raider begins rounding up the rest of the gang. When he confronts Slick, Slick's voice brings the rest of the gang to his aid, but the town rush to the aid of the Masked Raider. The gang is beaten, but Kal tries to escape on his horse. The Masked Raider chases on Lightning and catches Brunder with his rope. He gives Brunder over to the people of the town as the sheriff wonders who the Masked Raider will tackle next. At the Florida home of Professor John Roberts, Ken Masters and John's nephew Tim Roberts are talking about how they should not have let the professor head into the jungle, as it has been 3 months and they have not heard from him. The professor wanted a diamond that possesses hypnotic powers he was told about in the hand of a native tribe. They look at the map and find a spot the professor marked in the Amazon jungle and decide to head first thing next morning. Outside the building, an eavesdropper hears the plan and rushes to tell John Crafton, owner of the adjoining plantation. Crafton plans to follow Ken and Tim. The next morning, Ken and Tim leave in their plane, but Tim notices another plane following them. Hours later, they are still being followed, and Ken notices the motor of the plane break off, causing them to crash land in the trees below. They survive the crash, but are taken by some natives to see the chief. Crafton and his men land in the jungle to set out after Ken and Tim. They plan to let them find Professor Roberts and take the diamond from them when they get it. They are ambushed by a native, who they shoot and kill, but Crafton's man Mike is soon shot with a poisoned arrow. Crafton and his other man, Slug, are then surrounded by natives and taken to the nearby village. Ken and Tim are taken to the chief's hut, and then sent by him to the prisoner's hut. In there they find Professor Roberts, who tells them the natives were friendly until they found out he was after the hypnotic diamond. He has, however, found an opening in the corner of the hut to escape. The three of them escape into the hole that leads to a cavern and eventually find a massive stockpile of diamonds. Before they can touch them, Crafton appears and tells them he escaped the hut they were put into and went into the jungle and found a cave that led them where they are now. Crafton tells Slug to load up with diamonds, but he is shot by an arrow when he tries to touch them. Crafton himself is also shot and killed, and Ken dives for their gun as they rush out of the cave. Ken holds the natives at bay with the gun as the Professor and Tim flee. They head into the jungle to find Crafton's plane, and Ken holds the natives off long enough for them all to get aboard. As they escape, the Professor reveals he did manage to get a diamond after all. John Rand, a young owner of a diamond field, and his wife Constance and 3-year-old son David are flying from Johannesburg to Cairo. Over the Belgian Congo, the plane develops motor trouble and they crash into the jungle. All three survive the crash, but Constance's leg is broken. John retrieves a medical kit from the plane to fix her, and as she recovers, young David befriends the small animals of the jungle, watched daily by Zar the lion. David is nearly attacked by Njaga the leopard, but is scared off by a shot from John that wounds them. John is surprised by David's lack of fear toward any animal of the jungle. Days pass with no sign of rescue. Constance recovers and David's skin bronzes in the sun. As the parents begin to get used to the new environment, Constance hears a plane, so John lights a fire and waves a tarpaulin to attract its attention. The plane unfortunately does not see them and leaves. The plane comes back for several days, but to no avail, and eventually Constance becomes consumed by a fever. She dies soon after and John is heartbroken, but Constance's wish of David surviving keeps him going. John studies a map he has from the plane and they decide to make their way to the nearest outpost. That evening, a terrible storm lashes the jungle, and the giant baobab trees are ripped out of the ground. A bolt of lightning causes a tree to crash onto John as he pushes David to safety. The storm passes and John begins to lead David back to the hut, now under the delusion from the tree impact that the jungle is their home. Together they survive and thrive, John teaching David to read and write, but David preferring to spend time with the animals. As David grows older, he learns to swim, climb trees, and develops a code of only killing when necessary. He learns to speak to the animals in guttural sounds, all the while observed by Zar the lion. When chasing Crew the buzzard, David finds Zar trapped in quicksand. He sees his fallen branches and thrusts him towards Zar, who manages to draw his tiring body out and return to his mate. Zar surveys David and a strange pact of truce is made. A week after Zar's rescue, John and David smell smoke and travel in its direction. There they find a fat white man ordering some local natives. John steps out to argue with him, and as he turns away, the white man, Paul de Craft, pulls a gun on him. David fires an arrow and hits de Craft's arm, making him drop his gun. David and John disappear into the jungle, and John tells David that the jungle was sacred to Constance and it must be protected. De Craft wants John and David taken care of so he can continue to harvest the emeralds he has found, and finds out from one of the natives that John and David are alone with no guns. At dawn, David watches the camp, but it appears deserted. He goes down to investigate and returns home to tell his father the many interesting things he has found, but hears 2 gunshots and rushes back. Their hut is on fire, and he finds John lying shot nearby. David, a boy with the strength of a man, carries his father from the fire, but is too late to respond to the spear thrown into his back by one of the natives. De Craft appears and threatens David. He pulls his gun, but Zar bursts into the clearing. Zar kills 2 of the men and scares De Craft away. John dies in David's arms, and David is left alone. Zar approaches at twilight, sensing David's grief, and invites David into his cave in the language of the beast. He names David Ka-Zar, brother of Zar the Mighty, and the two stride off together.